Okay, super. Well, thanks for inviting me here. It's really great to have this global discussion on non-market housing. And I'm happy to introduce to you the Vienna model, but generally also kind of a Central European discussion about and debate about housing at the moment. So I think, I guess we share globally the question, is housing a commodity or is housing a human right? And also to some extent, this opposition of, let's say, the right to own property versus the rights to housing. And this is what brought us, I would say, a non-solution in of this debate, I guess, also is has got us into this situation. So to give you some context, just kind of quoting from a film, how land prices have kind of skyrocketed also in Europe, in Munich, for instance, by 352% in the mid 20th century, but actually much, much more until today. So I guess everybody would be invited to calculate how much your land prices in your cities have been risen. And also, if we think about it, to what extent and how crazy it is that private equity market is enormously high. We have whole public pension funds invested in private equity, which makes ridiculous situations of people actually, yeah, either like keeping their house or like hoping for their pension. Just in Germany, we have large scale private funds, private companies owning large, big amounts of apartments, which actually some of them have been public before. So Deutsche Wohnen AG, for instance, has been a German housing company, like a communal housing portfolio has been privatized. Kind of not as big as, for instance, the city of Vienna still owns 220,000 apartments. Deutsche Wohnen AG, German Housing AG, has been privatized, as I said, and this actually led to the conditional situation that at this moment in Berlin, 350,000 signatures have been voted for to get a referendum to nationalize, to renationalize, or to decommodify this private company. Well, that's the condition or situation. In fact, in Vienna, it is, as you all know, maybe still very different. 50% of the Viennese still live in municipal or subsidized housing. That's enormously high proportion. There's 220,000 council housing apartments and 200,000 subsidized apartments, which are actually provided by non-profit or limited profit housing developers or housing associations. What you can see here is that around 75% of the Viennese are actually renting, and you can see a high proportion of the rental units are actually either what we keep under the umbrella of social housing and are really well rent controlled. So housing subsidies per year in Vienna equal like around, yeah, you can see the numbers yourselves. I think what my claim here is, or my agency is, to really go for or really bring in the quality of object subsidies. There's very little subject subsidies, meaning that paying people to be able to support the renting their private apartments, but there's a large number of euros, of millions of euros actually going into the infrastructure of housing, of non-profit housing, and also like, let's say, non-market housing. As I said, 75% of Viennese rent an apartment, which is when we have a good rent control, actually, and trust in renting, and that's really important, of course. Then it is a really interesting model because houses actually get paid off. And let's say after 30, 35 years, that what has been invested for the house, for the apartments, is actually, as I said, paid off. And this is the moment that rent actually could go down. And does it not go down, then the gap that is growing could be a solidarity gap that is actually being put into new social housing, or kind of staying in the, kind of not being privatized, but staying in the commune or with non-profit associations. As I said, for this situation, what is really crucial is rent security. So when it comes to communal housing or social housing, in Vienna, there is very extremely high limits of earning that you can have. So more actually 80% of the Viennese would be eligible for housing, for accessing a social housing unit. You can also always stay. You're never asked to leave, which is really important and has been very much debated, as we have politicians actually living in a very, very affordable social housing units. But that's been a very crucial condition for that. So you have rent stability, you have the security to never need to leave. And of course, that brings also an interesting mixture within these houses. There's a certain level of spatial equity as these communal houses are really spread throughout the city. You can see there's more at the edges than in the center, but that has been really, it's a heritage from what is called Red Vienna, the time between 1919 and 1933, which was the starting point for Vienna's housing model, so to say, a social democratic political situation, which had in between these years 64,000 workers' apartments units built, plus lots of infrastructure. And just to make that very clear, the condition was that even before Red Vienna, there was a high level of rent control. Rents were super low, they couldn't be increased, and they were stable. So which actually made the private markets not being interested in investing. That is, I'm aware of that, for many cities a real problem. It could have been then as well, like basically politics could have said, let's put incentives out for the private market. What happened parallel was also because you couldn't get profit from somebody else's housing needs, private investors weren't interested, and land prices dropped then, which were also fairly high in this time. So land prices dropped, private were not building based on extremely good rent control. This is what made then Red Vienna, the Viennese government, actually buy the land themselves and get started and developed what is today famous for is under the name or umbrella of Red Vienna. We know, maybe everybody knows the Karl Marx Hof. It's only one of these housing blocks that were built at the time. Today, Vienna is still procuring, continuing kind of very active urban planning when it comes to housing. We're just seeing the development of a new, nearly like a garden city or a kind of satellite city, so-called Seestand Aspern. And I'm fairly proud, I have to say, that this is a city where the subway was built before the first housing block was actually set up. This is all actually possible by the Vienna Land Procurement and Urban Renewal Fund, which is really like working actively on land politics, ground politics, buying ground, and also then kind of handing ground over to developers. I'm coming back to this. This is just a little side note. With these houses in the 20s, we until today actually see very proud statements saying it's built by the city of Vienna in the years so and so by the means of the housing tax. So not only kind of was the housing program developed then, but also a progressive redistribution tax invented that actually made the payment of these units possible. See them all over the place. Good. Today, however, the situation is also changing in Vienna, as in many other cities, as more free market developers than non-profit or limited profit housing associations are building. And that is also, actually, there would be funding, but there's no land. So how Vienna reacted in 2018 was a changing building law, and by introducing a zoning category, which is called funded housing. And this zoning category is actually linked with a law which limits the land price for funded housing to what I've written here, to 188 euros per square meters for like an achievable gross area, which is in fact, and it's dedicated to 75% of the land. So basically what we see is a land price cap. with this law. The city of Vienna allowed itself to actually, by the zoning act, to make it possible to regulate land price, which we will see to what extent it's actually successful. It was already mentioned when it comes to I'm so sorry about the sound, when it comes to actually then to distribute this land, there is quality control competitions that are actually based on 4 quality pillar processes: architecture, economy, ecology, social sustainability, which a combination of planners plus developers actually have to provide, even sign before this affordable land is handed over for developments. This is, for instance, a big project, 100% funded housing competition that my office did together with another office in one of these competitions. I won't get into detail here, but because the land is cheap, or is kind of is controlled, the land price, it's affordable to actually build swimming pool on the roof, lots of kind of collective amenities, hopefully good quality housing as much as is possible, also within the restrictions of social housing in Vienna.
Just about a minute left.
That's really good. So I think I'm just about to be there. Another strand that we see in Vienna is also Baugruppen development, which is self-initiated housing co-ops, especially since the 70s, 80s, that has been growing and has become important in neighborhoods to actually become part of large-scale urban developments. This is a project that we're just building in my office. We are not we are planning it, and it's a group that is setting up an interesting syndicate structure. Maybe that is kind of similar. I won't get into the project, but the interesting part is that is aside from top-down communal and social housing, there is other forms, and you could also call it a shared equity rental ownership structure, where this group effectively, similar to Mietshäuser Syndicate, effectively buys land and houses off or out of the private markets, and at once connects it within a syndicate structure to be forever kind of taken out of speculation. Then secured rent ends, and this is the beauty. It's again working on this concept of the moment, also the concept of already built space that is affordable. The moment the investment is paid off, there's a solidarity gap that again is being used as in cooperative housing for other projects as a solidarity condition. And this is one other project, rebuilding an existing house, a group that is actually able to rent this entire house and turn it into a one kitchen house. Sometimes I call this a settlers movement 2.0. So you can see that also in Vienna, there's top down, but very much also like growing bottom up approaches. However, these bottom up approaches have a difficult time because it's difficult to find land or houses to actually turn into these housing concepts or ideas. To finish with,
okay. Sorry, I was just going to say hands up. Thanks.
I think I can just leave this, put it on the screen. Little Care City Manifesto about claiming public property, acquiring urban land, seizing, selling public ground, raising the number of communal cooperative housing. And maybe the last one is the most interesting. You could either, it's about explaining why housing is important. You could actually, what Germany is trying, Berlin is trying, communalize expropriators, or you could also fight for rent control. Thank you.